It's time now for what should be one of the most thought-provoking and engaging sessions of the India Today conclave. And this is about the idea of India, because what we're seeing the Bharatiya Janata Party government do under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi is to craft a new India, not just as a slogan, but as a new conception. Is this a new India that takes our country into the right direction, or does it take us down a deeply divisive, dangerous path? To debate, I have on my right, representing the right, Ram Madhav, one of the most articulate spokespeople of the Bharatiya Janata Party. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And to my left, even though he didn't want to sit on the left and wasn't sure whether he wanted to be left or not, by far one of the most articulate politicians in our country, Dr. Shashi Tharoor. He's come in the middle of a very busy, hectic campaign schedule, so we are deeply grateful that you made the effort to join us here. Thank you so much. Let's get started, and may the best idea or the best debater win. I want to start by asking you, Ram Madhav ji, to explain why you believe the new India that your party is creating is an India that takes our country in the right direction. There are international reports that are coming out saying India is heading into a totalitarian direction. This is an India that is divided. Yours is a government where minorities are not being taken care of. In the light of all these charges, why is it that you're firmly of the view that India is going in the right direction? Ram Madhav.
Firstly, about idea of India. We believe that the idea of India is that there will be many ideas of India. And the only idea on which we all should agree is that we are all India, or we are all Indians. On that, there should not be any dispute. Otherwise, there will be many ideas of India. That should be the idea of India. Now, my idea of India is wrong, and your idea of India is right, or the vice versa, should not be the argument of anybody, neither me nor Mr. Tharoor's party. I have an idea of India which we want to build, since you mentioned about New India. For us, New India means a strong, united, prosperous, and secure India with dignity as a very important component. When I say dignity, dignity of the country at one level, but dignity of every individual, whether he is in India or outside. Take every individual Indian's dignity also to be respected and protected. There, yes, sometimes there will be issues, not on other issues. So you referred to some of these criticisms from abroad. You know, majority of the criticisms admit that India's political system is very vibrant, even including Freedom House report, I am telling you. They say India's political system is very vibrant. There are many political parties. They are free to operate. They are free to criticize. They are good. India's electoral system is very good. They find some problem with respect to certain areas like, as you mentioned, minorities and civic rights. In that, I feel that there is a lot of exaggeration that happens from our side, resulting in certain perceptional issues. It's a perception. It's not enough for us as a government to dismiss them. You know, I see a tendency to dismiss them. Who are you to sermonize us? That's one tendency I see. That's not correct. It's important for us as a government and as a party to try and correct that perception, because that perception is wrong. I do not believe that if Freedom House mentions that Indian judiciary is biased, I'm sure even Mr. Shashi Tharoor will not agree. So we all have to be careful about how the perception is being created.
Okay.
That is where the problem is.
Dr. Tharoor, the BJP contests the charge of India becoming an elected autocracy, saying if we win fair and square. We win because we beat you, not because the idea of India is a wrong India, or because we are taking India in the wrong direction. We are taking India in the right direction, which is why election after election, the people of India, the voters of India, vote for the Bharatiya Janata Party.
We'll come back to the elections in a second, but Ram has said a few things in response to you that I think the audience deserves to hear a counter view to. When Ram says that there are many ideas of India, yes, that's entirely fair. There are many Indias, there are many Indians, and everyone may have their own vision. But there is one core idea of India, which is the idea of India enshrined in the Constitution. What is that idea? Remember, our nationalist movement didn't split on Marxist versus capitalist, it wasn't ideology, didn't split on region, north versus south. It split on one issue alone, and that is whether religion should be the determinant of nationhood. Those who said their religion determined their nationality, they created Pakistan, they left the country. But the remaining founding fathers and mothers, as it were, of our nationalist struggle, they said, no, we have fought for the freedom of everyone, and we must create a nation for everyone. And if you read the Constituent Assembly debates, which I would recommend strongly to Ram, it's about 3,000 pages. It's now available from the government. They're selling it in 4 volumes for about 3,000 rupees. It's really worthwhile. You'll find that these core issues were debated. Somebody actually stood up and said, now they've created Pakistan for the Muslims, why don't we call ourselves a state for the Hindus? And this was thrashed out and overwhelmingly rejected. Because the argument was that the essential core civilizational idea of India is one that embraces difference, that has embraced people of very many different backgrounds, languages, ethnicities, religions, and so on, and therefore they should all have equal rights. And the Constitution, you can take out the word secular from the Constitution, as some friends on the other side want to do. It'll still be a secular Constitution. Because it says you have the right to freedom of expression, you have the freedom of worship, you have the freedom of religion, and the freedom to propagate religion. All this is enshrined in the Constitution and the fundamental rights of Indians. So, one word will not change anything. This is a core idea of India, that we are a pluralist society. I mean, I had an argument which in Mohan Bhagwat a couple of years ago. My incantation of the old unity in diversity slogan, I had about 30 years ago in America, and I've repeated it a few times since, argued that India is not a melting pot, but a thali. We're a collection of different dishes on the same platter. Each dish tastes different. So, and because it's in a separate bowl, it doesn't flow necessarily into the next bowl, but they combine together on that same platter and on your palate to give you a satisfying meal. So that is my idea, that diversity is integral to our unity. But Mr. Mohan Bhagwat says, no, it's diversity in unity. That is that we are a sort of khichdi. We are a saffron khichdi, nicely stirred together. There might be a piece of aloo here and a piece of gajar there, but essentially it is one unity in which an occasional amount of diversity can be tolerated. Now that fundamental difference goes to the heart of this question of the idea of India. So to my mind, when we celebrate India, we celebrate a country, for example, when the Pakistani generals in 71 were foolish enough to declare a jihad against the infidel. Who was confronting them? We had an army headed by a Parsi, General Manekshaw. The Air Force in the northern sector was headed by a Muslim, Air Marshal Latif, later Air Chief Marshal. The general officer commanding in Calcutta, whose troops marched into Bangladesh, was a Sikh, General Jagjit Singh Arora. And the major general helicoptered into Dhaka to negotiate the surrender of the Pakistanis was Jewish, Major General Jacob. Now that is India. I wrote about the incredibly moving experience of going to the island of Diu and seeing the memorial to INS Kukri, which was sunk by the Pakistanis in that war. And they have listed the names of every single uniformed human being, man, who lost his life on that ship. And you'll find every religion of India, every region of India represented in those names. It brought tears to my eyes. This is India. Who on earth can say to a person of a different language, a different religion, a different background, that he doesn't have an equal stake? And yet the advocates of Hindu Rashtra argue, and they have argued in writing for decades, I've quoted them in my books, that the fundamental difference is that these people who wrote the Constitution, they seem to assume that India is a territory and the Constitution is written for all the people on that territory. Wrong, they said. And when I say they, I mean Savarkar, Golwalkar, and Deen Dayal Upadhyay, the Holy Trinity of Hindutva thought. They all said this. They said, wrong. A nation is not a territory, a nation is a people, and the people of India are the Hindu people, and the Constitution should have reflected this understanding. Now, that is the fundamental gap. So when we say, there is my idea of India and yours is wrong, all we're saying is my idea of India is not mine, it's the idea of the Constitution. Yours is the idea of those who rejected the Constitution, rejected the fundamental tenets of the freedom struggle, a struggle in which that side did not participate.
So you are trying
broadly,
to turn India from a thali to a saffron khichdi.
Let me take it from there. See, broadly, the description he gave about India from a pilot to the President of India, nobody has any dispute. It happened under every regime. We made Abdul Kalam the President of India. But that doesn't mean we made means. We followed India's constitutional, not only constitutional, age-old tradition of Sarva Dharma Samabha. We don't discriminate on the basis of religion. That has been the core of Indian thinking. Now, we should give up smugness that we know Atma Santushti, that we have read constitution, nobody else has read Constituent Assembly debates. May I ask a simple question? When the Constituent Assembly debates happened, I am sure he must have read all the 3,000 pages. In the Constituent Assembly debates happened, some people wanted reference to God. We should have reference to God. It was rejected. Some people wanted this word secularism to be inserted. That was also rejected. I am sure Mr. Tharoor has read the entire Constituent Assembly debates.
Yes, yes.
Both were rejected. So don't have smugness that I have not read. I have also read. So point is, then why was it decided that we don't need the word secularism in the constitution? Because Jawaharlal Nehru himself had on record said, you please refer to Constituent Assembly debates. He says, India is a very diverse country. We have to respect all the different traditions, practices, cultures, customs. You can't just say that we have to be away from religion and customs here. That is why there is no need. In any case, India has always respected all religions. You don't need to insert secularism into our constitution especially. India is secular by character. That character is Hindu character, we are saying. You say, no, that is not Hindu character, Indian character. I don't have an issue. But don't say that India has secularism only because Constitution has given us that idea. No, it did not give us in 1947. It was backdoor insertion during emergency in 1976 by Indira Gandhi. Even then, we don't have any dispute. Let secularism prevail in this country, but in its right sense. What is the secularism that you practice? You want people to be secular. You ran governments which are thoroughly communal. You made acts on communal lines. And you are teaching secularism to the whole country. You are saying Hindu Rashtra is communal. But the most liberal idea which even Constituent Assembly, makers of Constituent Assembly admitted that this country, by very character, is secular. There is no need for that word to be inserted in Constitution. That is the idea of India, to which we are wedded. So that idea, which we want to uphold, you may have dispute on individual issues. That's no problem. Let me tell you, I have an issue with Constituent Assembly debates. I would like to hear what is your comment. The entire Constituent Assembly debates, this draft constitution that has come out, from there to this day, they do not refer India as one nation. Do you know? The preamble says, we, the people of India. First article, Article 1 of the Constitution, describes India as a union of states, not nation. And not that this was not discussed. Ambedkar in his last speech, let me give my gyan of Constituent Assembly also. Ambedkar in his last speech tells the Constituent Assembly that, see, people told me that why are you aping America? Why are you calling beginning Indian Constitution by saying we the people of India, because the United States Constitution begins with the statement, we the people of United States of America. Ambedkar said, people told me, call it we the nation of India, or we the Indian nation. But I refuse to accept that amendment, that suggestion, because we are yet not a nation. This was Ambedkar's view at that time, which prevailed. Did we contest it? Ambedkar had a point. He said, this consciousness of nationhood is missing. The word he used was nationhood is a spiritual idea. Now, spiritual, as per his definition, is anti-secular. It's a spiritual idea, friends. That was missing. Ambedkar said, we are too much into caste, too much into language, too much into regions. That has to go. A spiritual idea of national consciousness should grow in this country. This constitution will strive towards that. We are wedded to that constitution of Constituent Assembly, fathers of our Constituent Assembly, not the new interpretations of it.
Dr. Tharoor,
But, I mean, I don't think there's any disagreement there. I mean, the point is, everything Ram has said, I'm not disagreeing with. Correct. But as long as we both converge on that interpretation, one of the challenges is this use of Hindutva and the use of a religious identity as a marker of Indianness. That is where the problem comes, because it by default excludes those who, for whatever reason, historical accident, whatever you want, do not fit into that label. I mean, there are Christians in my state of Kerala who have been Christian for longer than most Hindu families have been conscious of their Hinduism. There are people of every faith in our country who have contributed to the building of the Indian nation and who have as much of a right to be stakeholders in it as those who consider themselves Hindus, as you and I do. So the point is that as long as we recognize that, then a pernicious term that excludes those who do not subscribe to one particular religion should also be avoided.
No,
Otherwise, I have no disagreement with what you said.
No question of any, that's what I'm saying. The original Hindu idea of this country never excludes anybody. That's the reason why even the makers of Indian Constitution felt there is no need to specially insert secularism in our Constitution, because we are by character, by nature, the whole edifice of the society is very secular. When Mahatma Gandhi described himself as a Sanatani Hindu, was he a communal Hindu? Read, I mean, not just 3,000 pages of draft Constitution Assembly debates. If you read Discovery of India, how Nehru describes India was purely cultural terms, religious terms. It's another matter. We introduced this false debate in 70s, starting with 70s, because we needed to curb the rise of an alternative ideology in this country. It was rising from 70s onwards. So we invented a new controversy that you are not secular. Your Hindutva is communal. You are exclusivist. We are saying no. We are that Hindutva which reflected in the draft first Constitution of India, which carried the photographs of Rama, Krishna, Bhagavad Gita. That is what we stand for.
Now, one of the key tenets of the idea of India is free speech and dissent. And there it is alleged, Mr. Madhav, that your government has a problem with dissent and dissenters. And somehow you wish to usurp the use of the word national and anti-national to label anybody who disagrees with you as an anti-national. The space for dissent is shrinking on your watch, and this can never be good for the idea of India.
Okay, I said it before, so I say it again, that we should not use words like anti-national too loosely. I agree. My side also, any side also, we should not easily throw that kind of an allegation, accusation against people too easily. And in fact, I am one of those who said that these archaic laws of sedition should be amended, should change. I totally agree with on those issues. But let me tell you, Rahul, those who say that there is no free speech in India, go on to the www, World Wide Web. The amount of scorn you find against our government, our Prime Minister, you don't find anywhere else, against anybody else. Total freedom. Just before this session, previous session, Mr. Maran called BJP all sorts of names. Where is restriction in this country? You have websites dedicated to abusing BJP, abusing Modi, dedicated. And let me also caution you, Rahul, here. The Freedom House report says Indian media is compromised. That is their yardstick. I'm sure you don't agree with that. I hope you don't agree with that Indian media is sold out to the government of the day. We have as many people in Indian media who take totally anti-BJP stand as they probably who support some actions of the government. So I don't at all agree with this proposition that freedom is at stake in India. Now, nationalism versus freedom, this is a new debate. The nationalist forces versus freedom. Where is any problem for freedom? If there is any complaint to be made, I should be complaining. Right, for last 70 years, I have been abused day in and day out. As communalist, as fascist, as Hitlerian, as Mussolini's follower. All these abuses you have been heaping on me for 70 years. Today, if I say one sentence, you become very agitated. But sometimes things get back to you. Thoda tolerance rakho, nothing, no threat to freedom in India.
Dr. Tharoor, the BJP counters to say that, from morning till night, there are people in politics and outside who say exactly what they want, and therefore, if politicians, nobody's been jailed in the way that they were during the emergency which happened on the watch of your party, therefore, there is nothing which is happening in India anywhere remotely close to what happened under the Congress's watch during the emergency.
I don't think the emergency is much of a template. I'm on record as having been a critic of the emergency at that time and later. So let's put that aside. Let's talk about today. Because the problem we've got is precisely this whataboutery. You know, we're doing terrible things, but those guys did worse 40 years ago. I mean, come on, that's not a conversation. We have to live for the Indians of today. And the problem is, actually having free speech on the internet is fine, though increasingly, as you know, there are regulations coming up that raise real question marks about the ability to say what you like on the internet without consequences. That famous line of Idi Amin's, who said that I can guarantee freedom of speech, but I can't guarantee freedom after speech. I mean, that seems to be the subtext of some of the BJP's attitudes. But let me say very seriously that if you look at these cases after cases that have grabbed world attention, the number of journalists who've had sedition charges against them for trivial matters. I'm sitting here as a proud object of a sedition case. I'm glad that Ram wants to see sedition read down, I beg your pardon, but that's something the Supreme Court did in 1962. And yet a series of BJP governments in the states are ignoring the Supreme Court's repeated interpretations of sedition and still filing sedition charges against people. You have a journalist, you have a comedian who's in jail for a joke he hadn't cracked, right? You have journalists locked up in various places, some whacked, abused. You've had one journalist from Kerala locked up in UP on his way to Hathras, who is still there, who was allowed out for 48 hours to visit his dying mother and is back in jail. Now you have case after case like this. How do you expect the world not to sit up and take notice? You know, I mean, Ram is accusing people of getting agitated. The only one sitting here being agitated is Ram. So I encourage him to see things in the constructive light that I want this discussion to go. We have a country to save. It's essentially where we are. Our country had a certain standing in the world for our incredibly successful management of diversity, of our democracy, the way in which we're able to bring this vast and extraordinarily diverse land, it's not just political pluralism, religious, linguistic, regional, everything, together and make it work because everyone felt they had stakes. This kind of attitude of repression, the wretched atmosphere in university campuses because of the stifling of expression, the fact that so many media organizations, including yours, at various times appear to have come under pressure to conform in certain ways, to take down certain approaches and articles, to suspend a prominent anchor for what would, by most people's yardsticks, be an incredibly minor transgression that at most would have merited a slap on the wrist. But all of these things suggest that there is an atmosphere in which a lot of our guardians of freedom, including the media, have either been cajoled or cudgeled into conformity. And this is what worries me, because when Ram's side says unity, they mean uniformity. They don't really mean unity. Unity ought to be people of very different points of view, being willing to talk to each other with respect and at the same time move forward. Instead, what we've got is some people sort of screaming, if you like, their concerns, and others trying to stifle and suppress them. That is deeply worrying.
So I just want to say that I can't speak for the rest of the media, but as far as the India Today group is concerned, we try our best to speak truth to power. Sometimes
but do you come under pressure, as he is indicating, you come under pressure and remove your anchors? Does it happen in India today? I don't know.
All governments, past and present, try and dominate and control the media. It is the job of the media to push back. And 3 days in the week, the BJP is upset with us. 2 days, the Congress is upset with us. Whatever is left, the Aam Aadmi Party is upset with us, which is fine.
No, I think you underestimate us. We are often upset with you 6 days of the week.
6 days of the week, and they're upset with us
No.
2 or 3 days of the week. We live with that. And frankly, at the India Today group, we seek certificates neither from the government nor from the opposition. Our job is to speak truth to power. If they're upset, so be it. If you get upset, that's fine too.
No, but you know, power is there. So speak truth to them and give us an opportunity to be heard. What has been happening with a lot of the media, and you know in particular who I mean, or which channels I mean, is that all the sort of speaking truth to is to the opposition. By truth I mean aggressive criticism, condemnation, inquiry is directed at the opposition while the ruling party gets a free ride. That's not speaking truth to power.
Sir, we had our share of such channels. When we
So
were
now
in the
it's your
opposition,
turn to preside over iniquity.
when we were up in the opposition, there were channels dedicated to attacking us all the time. They are now on the backbenches, is another matter. Somebody else has come to the front bench. No, but
If you
I
take,
have
for example, the scores in the VDEM Institute, The most precipitous decline has been from 2014 to 2019, where India has gone from 57 on their very complicated mathematical scale that they explain in their report to 23. Now, why has this decline happened? It is because of very specific, cited, measurable things that they've quantified against the government. So we can't pretend that the rest of the world isn't standing up and taking notice. They don't have an agenda against us. Why would they?
Absolutely.
They're only doing what they consider to be objective measurements of the yardsticks by which democracies are judged. Not only ours. They've been harsh on Brazil, harsh on Turkey, harsh on Hungary. But ours has had the biggest decline because we used to be very high up in the world's estimation.
Sir, I'm sure you have read that Freedom House report fully.
No, this is
it
VDEM.
It is not.
VDEM, the Varieties of Democracy Institute in Sweden, which is the most respectable. Freedom House may have a political agenda, VDEM does not. VDEM does not. VDEM even has Indians on the
Whatever
staff.
suits us cannot be the only authentic report. The latest report about which everybody is talking is Freedom House report, which is generally considered an accurate report, generally, broadly speaking. It puts India's rank at 60, the points India gets is 67, 3 points below a free country. Greatly free or relatively free. That is the kind of categorization. But do you know that Freedom House report admits that the things that I mentioned, that in India, electoral system is perfect. Political system is even more perfect. No complaints. 4 out of 4 points it gives to it. It has issues when it comes to the perception about minorities. Number one, perception about civil rights. These 2 counts on which they downgraded India. I say, when I read the details, their complaint was about Citizenship Amendment Act. They think that Citizenship Amendment Act was discriminatory. We have been saying it is not discriminatory. We have to convince the world, including your party, that it is not discriminatory. I can take a full argument on CAA, how it is not discriminatory. Second thing they say, Indian judiciary is biased. Do you agree that Indian judiciary is biased? Then third point, they say Indian journalists are compromised. On all these 3 points, they say India's civic freedom index has to be brought down to 2 out of 4. So I think that perception India has to proactively correct. Where am I saying that there is no perception problem? It is there. When I'm emphasizing I'm not aggressive, it's my style. Your style is to be cool. My style is to be a little emphatic. I'm not agitated or aggressive. I'm putting it across that we need to...
Let's address the charge of India becoming an elected autocracy, to which Ram Madhav's response and the BJP's response is, boss, we win elections. We work hard. We're not taking off to Italy or we're not going off on Vipassana to Burma. We are on the ground 24/7 working hard. It is the voters of this country who vote for us. And if you can't fight, that's your loss. It's not because they've bent the system or fixed the EVMs to win.
Rahul, I'm personally not sitting here challenging the will of the Indian people or the electoral majority within our system, which the BJP has won twice nationally and multiple times in various states. The political results are fine. It's what you do with that political power when you have won it. You've won it in the name of the people. How do you exercise it? That is the question that has been concerning all of us and which precisely has led to this kind of agitation in international circles that are concerned about democracy. From India's point of view, an India in which every Indian feels equally valued, equally trusted, and equal opportunity to progress and create a decent life for that person and their family, that's all that any of us can aspire to. This government, unfortunately, has accompanied this with a series of measures, from the Citizenship Amendment Act to various, shall we say, the things it has done and the things it has condoned, including cow vigilantism, which has cost lives, mob lynchings, which have cost lives, arrests, sedition cases, charges. All of these things have naturally got very
Or let's
little
take,
weight.
for example,
And the CAA, by the way,
let me tell you, I mean, as a senior parliamentarian, you should know that all these issues are law and order issues dealt by respective state governments. In India, more than half of the state governments are not in our hands.
But the ones
And
in the
you are
worst cases are.
blaming Modi for cow vigilantism or something. States have taken action. I know of Karnataka, where people were arrested for acting in the anti-constitutional manner against the law and order. Steps were taken. Yet you hold Modi responsible for it. How does it work, sir? You are a constitutional, you are a learned person about constitution. Law and order is a separate issue. But on the larger question of perception, I am myself agreeing that government has to do more to set the perception right. But I totally disagree with you if you say that Citizenship Amendment Act is discriminatory. I would urge you to explain to me how is it discriminatory, on what basis are you saying?
Because it mentions religion. You see, the entire point is our constitution is religion neutral. Had we said that refugees from neighboring countries will be granted asylum or will be admitted into a process in which their claims for asylum can be adjudicated, the world would have welcomed us and applauded us. By actually specifying religions in order to exclude one, we were actually behaving in a deeply obnoxious way, which, as you know, there is a case before the Supreme Court that argues it's unconstitutional. And let me say that I actually agree that it's unconstitutional because it violates and vitiates the very premise that in India it doesn't matter what your religion is, you have equal rights to be an Indian. If you're saying that by being a Muslim you cannot be an Indian, what are you saying to the history of the Muslim people of this country? In 1948, what are you saying about someone like Brigadier Usman, who died on the frontiers within months of our independence, fighting against Pakistan?
No,
what do you say? But no, so what I'm trying to say to you is that he would have been given this bill and told, sorry, your claims to citizenship are less than that of somebody else who happens to have a Hindu name. I'm sorry, Ram, this is simply wrong.
No,
and it's not what India is about. You know,
let me take
I
it.
have written an entire book on why I'm a Hindu. So I'm not in any way disparaging the great, accommodative, all-embracing nature of Hinduism. But Hindutva is a distortion of that Hinduism and has become an ideology that excludes and oppresses in the most obnoxious way.
It's a very fashionable argument to distinguish between Hindutva and Hinduism. Very old, not started with you, much before it was started. There is no difference. Both are the same idea. But I come to that important point that you were making about Citizenship Amendment Act. Let me reiterate that it's not at all discriminatory. We will also argue in the Supreme Court. Just as you will argue in the Supreme Court about its discriminatory nature, we will also argue how it is not discriminatory. Let me take 2 minutes to explain why it is not. This bill was an unfinished agenda from the time of Jawaharlal Nehru. 1952, Nehru-Liaquat Ali Agreement. 1972, Indira-Mujib Accord. Both have agreed that the minorities who had migrated to either side, at that time Muslims went to Pakistan, Hindus came over to here, Hindus came over here, they would be taken care of by the respective governments. In 1972, Indira Gandhi specifically stated that the Bangladeshi minorities who were forced out of Bangladesh in 72, I mean, nobody should have any illusion that the majority Muslims were thrown out there. Only minority Bangladeshis were pushed out of those territories. That time it was agreed in 1972 that, okay, India will take care of the responsibility of those who have already migrated, and Mujibur Rahman will take care of those who are already remaining inside Bangladesh. That was the understanding. What we did was that we completed that commitment. We made a law that would only fast track the citizenship of these minorities who had come over into India. Now, no Muslim is denied any citizenship. Adnan Sami secured citizenship from our government. He is a Pakistani Muslim. Where did we deny any citizenship to anybody? But what we did was, where an ordinary person, refugee seeking citizenship, requires 12 years of domicile to apply. In this particular case, those who came into India before 2014, it's not a prospective law. They came before 2014, they lived here for 7 years, 6 plus 1 years, then they can claim citizenship. It is voluntary. We are not handing down the citizenship card to them.
Okay.
No discrimination. Only one point I have to make. Only one point I have to make. Why we use 6 religions, not Muslims? Sir, when you make any constitutional law, any act, words have to be defined. There is a reference to minorities in our neighboring countries. Are you trying to tell me that Muslims are a minority in Pakistan? Muslims are a minority in Bangladesh? Yeah, the only definition was given in the statute that when we said minorities in the law, it defines that these are the known minorities. Now, if somebody says, what about somebody else? Somebody else has every right to take citizenship in India. He has to fulfill 12 years of this category. And one very important point, if a Hindu comes on 1 January 2015, he is not entitled to take citizenship under this law. Where is it discriminating?
Okay,
Because it is reflective of an ethnic religious notion of nationalism rather than the democratic principle. After all, if a Taslima Nasreen
Sir,
comes
with
or a
Christians-
Dawood Haider
with
comes,
Christ-
they're not coming because they're minorities. They are Muslims. But they are coming because they fear political persecution or they've experienced it.
Oh, they're free to
and
seek
in a
citizenship.
democracy, we have the right to grant them asylum. What we should have had, and what I have urged in the past to your own government many times, is to pass a refugee and asylum law that could take care of everyone and take care of everything. Right now, you've left out Sri Lankan Tamils, for example. Whether they're Hindu or Muslim or Christian, a Sri Lankan Tamil does not come under the CAA.
Right,
You have, but Ram,
That's precisely the point.
So why
of-
not have one
you-
omnibus
now-
law?
Now you are yourself answering the question. You are now saying that even Sri Lankan Tamil, even if he is a Hindu, he cannot benefit from this legislation. Sir, this legislation is specific to a particular situation. For all others, my question to you is, why did you not pass laws in all these years when in power? You said that in 1962, Supreme Court has said sedition law should go. But what were you doing for 30 years in power? Why did you not do away with that law?
Sir,
Now
aap
you
kar
say
do na.
it is now-
I
how
was at the
about-
UN,
why
Ram,
don't
I
you
can't
do
say
it?
very
you,
much.
you will say,
No.
you have a very convinced
once
argument.
again.
You will
No.
say it is what about tree. Why
Sir,
it's not what
but,
about
but
tree.
Mr. Ram
You
Madhav,
can't hide
Mr.
your
Ram
sin
Madhav,
and blame us.
no, once again, instead of worrying about what the Congress should have done when they were in power with sedition, you now have the biggest majority of all time. You finish sedition. If you think sedition is wrong, end the law.
No, definitely. Parliamentary majority is one part. See, I'm one person who believes that parliamentary majority is only a part of the democracy, not full democracy. Full democracy is when you are active, media is active, when judiciary is active. These are the balancing, non-elected balancing institutions. Together we constitute what we call as democracy. Our constitution, and then we saw that democracy, where elected parliament will do its job, we are doing. You have questions, go either to the people back, which you cannot go in Tamil Nadu also, where you were a ruling party earlier, you now have 25 seats. You can't go back to people. And
No, so let's spend the last few minutes of this very engaging conversation talking about the weakness of the opposition.
There you go again.
No,
So, why are we pointing only
you
at the
don't want to talk
opposition?
about this. For 45 minutes, you've spoken about what's wrong with the government. 7 minutes we can spend talking about what's wrong with the opposition,
Now,
because the fact is...
More importantly, sir, nowadays they have found internal democracy, 23 of them. In fact, he should tell us more about that.
No, so let's spend a moment,
glad you
sir,
find it so funny, Ram.
addressing the concern that the reason that the government is not fully held to account is because the Congress party as the principal opposition is led or not led by a man who's so confused that he simply doesn't know whether he wants to fight or not. And that is your misfortune that you now have to answer this question because you have a man who is kind of a leader but not quite, who's simply not cut out to the task of taking on Ram Madhav, Narendra Modi and Amit Shah.
Look, I'm engaged in fighting a state election. My party is engaged in 5 elections. I'm not going to sit here in a media conclave and start dissecting internal issues of the party that some of us are discussing within the party. When the time comes, we'll look at it. Right now, we have to absolutely stand up for what we believe in 5 states, and that's what we're doing. So this was not the theme that was given to me, and I'm not here to discuss
No,
that.
only
It's
reason
not that
is-
I don't have views. I have views, but this is not the time or the place for me to
No,
express
Shashi ji, only reason I asked was,
Yeah.
one of your 23 leaders who are working for internal democracy has praised Modi ji that he has connected the nation to its roots. I thought it's not internal, he's talking about the whole country.
No. I've spoken to him, and he said it was done in a particular context in which he was talking about his own roots to a village audience, and he was saying the Prime Minister also values his roots. Why, we all value our roots, I hope. And I think that's all that he was praising.
But
I'm
you're
very
ducking and
glad-
dodging, it's like, you're getting a bouncer and instead of being the cricket fan that you are taking the bouncer and whacking it across.
Yeah, but as you know, that yesterday Shardul Thakur took on the bouncer. He was caught on the boundary. I'd much rather duck for the moment, let the bouncer go safely over my head into Rahul Kanwal's, Ram Madhav's gloves, and we'll pick it up in a few weeks when this particular contest is behind us. In the middle of an election campaign is not the time to critique one's
No,
own
but
party.
let's deal with
you guys
Kerala.
are
No.
doing it enough, and he's doing it enough.
No, but let's deal with Kerala, where you come from. All opinion polls and anecdotal conversations at this time suggest that this cycle of LDF to UDF may this time change. That because of the internal weaknesses of the Congress, its inability to put up a strong fight, that Pinarayi Vijayan could come back to power, which, apart from everything they've done, it would be down to your weaknesses as a party and as an opposition.
Look, let me say that every election, when you say may, the cycle may end, yes. In every election, the result is unknown until the votes are counted. Let me say also that the polls, I've seen the same polls as you, and most of them, I think the most recent poll I've seen was the very end of January, early February was when the interviews were conducted. As the British Prime Minister of the day, Harold Wilson, famously said, a week is a long time in politics. So since this poll, there have been, at least the last poll I've seen, there have been at least 4 weeks. There are 4 weeks more before the votes are cast. A lot of things can change. So even if the polls may have been an accurate picture of sentiment at that time, we have the time in the course of an energetic campaign in the next few weeks to turn that around. There have been many deficiencies in the state government, including serious issues of corruption, as well as the fact that they are hobbled, as are our friends in the BJP, by a backward-looking ideology. We need to offer an alternative, positive vision for the state, which we have and we're going to be doing. And we're going to have to persuade voters over the next few weeks that their state will be in safer hands if they come to endorse the vision of the UDF rather than that of the
Are you
LDF.
concerned, Ram Madhavji, since Shashi Tharoor is dunking all questions on the opposition, and
I've just answered this
to
one.
some extent, he's
Very
saying he'll
fully.
come back later once we know what's happening. But are you concerned about growing agrarian opposition in states like Punjab, Haryana, Western UP? There is now a ferment amongst these farmers who are coming out on the streets, and despite 100 days having passed, your government still hasn't been able to find a solution, because you've taken a point of view, the farmers are opposing your point of view, and you're not being, because you're so firm in what you're doing, you're not being able to find a way around to maneuver this opposition from the ground.
No, farmers' agitation is certainly an important issue on a priority agenda for our government. We have held 11 rounds of talks. There are issues because the stand that the farmers are taking, rather I would say farmer leaders who are agitating are taking, is unviable for any government to handle. If today we are not there, somebody else is there, even then it is very difficult to handle. To say that, first of all you withdraw all the acts, then only we will talk. Then what is left there left for one to talk? These laws are most wanted, most requested demands of the very farm organizations. Many farm organizations are today with those laws. Some are not with them, they are agitating. But I come to a very important issue, not in any condescending way or not in any charitable manner. But if this whole internal democracy debate in Congress leads to revival of Congress, India will be greatly benefited for one important
You
reason.
seem very worried about the Congress bouncing back. You want them to bounce back.
No. See, today our biggest strength, third biggest strength is their leader. What can we do? So if something...
Who is their leader? If there was an answer to that question, life would be much easier.
Listen, you were asking about the farmers' agitation.
My serious
What
point
about
is-
the lack of consultation that led to that agitation?
11 rounds, sir. 11 rounds. I don't know, any other government would have sat through 11 rounds of negotiations, yet has patience to engage with them further. We are ready?
But
We
that
will
was
resolve it.
after
Don't
the
worry.
protest started.
Don't
Why
worry.
did the protest start?
Sir, no. Definitely not disturbed. We will explain to them that this is most beneficial to the ordinary farmers. Ordinary farmers.
No, but this is a sentiment that's also accepted by many Congress supporters, Dr. Tharoor, that one of the reasons why India is where it is, why the BJP is where it is, where the Congress is where it is because of Mr. Rahul Gandhi, whose face people will see. They'll look at everything Prime Minister Modi did not do, the BJP did not do, and they'll say, rather than an incompetent dynast, it's better to stick with the BJP. This is a problem. You realize that this is a problem. You're constrained in terms of what you can say. Till the time you fix this, it's not even an equal fight. Look at how Mamata Banerjee is fighting in Bengal
Rahul,
versus the BJP.
I obviously don't accept your premises, but even if this was the issue, we don't function in a presidential system. We have a parliamentary system. Rahul Gandhi is a candidate in 1 or 2 constituencies. In every other
your
part of
party
the
is
country,
hardly functional.
there are party values, there are principles, there's documents, there's manifesto, there's ideology. That's what people are also supposed to be looking at. What is the idea of India that the BJP stands for? We've talked about that. What alternative, inclusive India do we stand for? That's what we're talking about. Now, we want the voters, obviously, to choose between those. If all of us, including the media, reduce this to a contest between individuals, then we're doing our parliamentary democracy a disservice. In many
It's a
ways,
global phenomena.
Well,
It's
that's-
about personalities with
Yeah, other
Mamata Banerjee,
countries have different
Kejriwal,
systems.
Narendra Modi.
other countries have different systems. So in the American context, yes, the election is between two individuals, always.
Why don't
In
you,
Indian
Dr.
context-
Tharoor, over a period of time, stake claim to wanting to lead the Kerala Congress? You've now been in Parliament thrice over. Why can't you develop roots on the ground in a way that you go beyond your constituency? Many people in Kerala who'll watch will say, yes, I don't mind voting for Tharoor for Chief Minister.
But there isn't an option to vote for any individual for chief minister.
Then vote for your party. Why can't you lead?
So because it's a party that will decide these things. The party has its leadership structure.
But you don't even
already.
seem interested.
Oh, I don't think that's absolutely
Are you
fair at all.
interested in leading the Congress in Kerala if you
Right
get a chance?
now, I am in Parliament. I am an MP for the third time. I am being a complete disposal of my party for whatever role they want me to play. I've led the popular consultations on the manifesto preparation in Kerala, which was a fascinating exercise that I would encourage every party to do, which is to go to people and find out what they want.
This is now it's too late.
So in
5
the
years.
next few years, I will certainly examine all possible options.
No, straight answer. You're giving a diplomatic answer
No,
going back to the
I-
UN. Would you be
I will
interested?
give you a straight answer when I've made up my mind. But right now, I will examine all
would
the
you,
options.
Dr. Tharoor, 5 years later, if the opportunity were to provide itself and you were wanting to work towards it, want to be Chief Minister of Kerala?
I certainly wouldn't rule any of these things out, but right now,
No, do you not
we have
rule
an
it out.
election to
Are
win
you
today.
interested? Do you want to be Chief Minister of Kerala?
Listen, right now, I want my party to win and produce the next Chief Minister of Kerala. After that, we'll
But
see.
I have to, on a lighter note, many in Congress want Mr. Tharoor to be the national president of their party.
You want to get him into trouble.
Many in our party want Rahul Gandhi ji to continue.
Then he'll have to jump off
Ram
the
is being
boat
wicked.
and jump into the sea. Which is where Rahul Gandhi jumped. Now you want him to jump
Listen.
as well if you get him into trouble. Who, are you trying to get him into
Kerala has
trouble?
a very long coastline. We have a large coastal and fishing community, and they were hugely appreciative of that gesture.
No, that's
So,
and we know he's a good swimmer. We know he's got six-pack abs.
There
His
you are.
Political acumen is up in the air and highly doubtable. But yeah, he's got some strengths. Anyway, we've had an interesting conversation which started out with the idea of India as it's emerging and the opposition's problems with it. As I said at the outset, this would be one of the most engaging and fascinating debates of this contest. Ram Madhavji, coming down from Delhi, and Dr. Tharoor, especially you, because you've got a big, busy election and you're right in the middle of it. And I do hope, I don't have a vote in Kerala, but I do hope you make the effort, you pitch a tent in Kerala, work towards it and let the voters of your state decide.
the voters of our state will decide this year to bring the UDF back to power.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you
joining
very
us.
much.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Shashi Tharoor versus Ram Madhav for joining us on this contest of the idea of India as it's emerging. We deeply appreciate you taking our time. Thank you, sir. Thank you.